If you are here for big ideas, small stages, writing for the stage you're at, you're in the right place. Congratulations. Yeah, we can applaud.
Yeah.
That's amazing. That was great. Yeah. So, I'll introduce myself, but I would like to do some order of business at the top. Mostly, I would like to start off with a land acknowledgement that the Hollywood Fringe acknowledges that we are on the unceded lands of the Tonga, Quiche, Gabrielinos, and Gabrielinos people. A land acknowledgement is a formal statement that recognizes... I'm not very good at speaking to the mic. We'll learn this, but I'll continue. Sorry. The land acknowledgement is a formal statement that recognizes and honors the indigenous peoples of the land we presently reside and work on. Our statement serves as a practice that we commit to furthering our connection to the indigenous peoples and communities, past, present, and emerging. If you want to learn more about this, we have a link and sources on the Fringe website at www.hollywoodfringe.org/land. Yeah, and I'll do an introduction for myself. I think I've checked in quite a few of you today, but I'm Rody. I'll be your moderator for today. I'm the Artist Services Coordinator here at Artist Services Manager. Title change, forgot about that. I'll be when things come to it. Thanks, Larry.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, Rody.
Thanks. This is going to be a good panel. I'm a little nervous, but you guys seem relaxed, so that's good. It's great. I'm the Artist Services Manager here at Fringe, and as many of you will be doing your projects and productions here, I'll be sending you emails and updates and being like, hey, this is where you should be at in your progress. And also, I'm a resource for all of you to answer your questions, to tips and tricks that you might ask. Anything that you send to the support email, which is support@hollywoodfringe.org, myself, Ellen, and Lois will also be responding to those. When the time comes during shows, if you guys need refunds on your shows, if audiences need help, send them our way. We gotcha. That's about me. Oh, right. Pronouns are he, him. A visual description. I am a Latin male wearing glasses, curly hair. I have a sweater, jeans, some shoes. Yeah, I think that's all. I'm going to introduce you. No, our panelists will introduce themselves. So please, if you could tell us your name, your pronouns, your visual description, and your experience with Fringe. If you want to... I always don't want to rob the name, so if you want to start us off.
Hi, everyone. It's good to see you all today. My name is Larry. My pronouns are he, him, his. I'm 5'9". My hair is bright purple. And I just did it today, so my nails are also purple. I'm wearing a sweater and some slacks and some black boots. And I've been involved with Fringe since 2019-ish, and then the pandemic happened, so complicated to say where it really all started, but I've been producing shows at Fringe since then, and then this last year I was lucky enough to be on the scholarship committee as well, and then outside of that, I work at East West Players as the education and community manager, where I produce culturally specific youth tours that tour across LAUSD and LA public libraries as well. So hopefully I have some insights to share on like small shows that can be performed in various spaces.
Hey, I'm Lorelei. Thank you for being here. I use any pronoun with respect. I'm wearing a very fierce pair of Doc Marten boots, black, some high-waist navy trousers. This is a top man white collared shirt, real classic, and a little necktie, and glasses. I started in Fringe basically this year as a producer. I had done Fringe shows before as a performer. This year was my first time taking on a role as a producer. My show was awarded this last year for the Sydney Fringe Exchange. So next year we'll be taking it to Sydney, Australia, which is really exciting. Outside of Fringe, I'm a drag artist, and I have a nonprofit that's dedicated to making long-form theatrical works from drag artists and trans artists. So hopefully I can provide some insight into community specifics, how to take certain types of performances into spaces like this, and maybe more. I'm excited to explore with all of you.
Incredible. I think we're gonna So I've kind of arranged the questions in order of like from creativity to then like an expanse and goes further beyond that. I think that in the creation of the show, Larry, I'm sorry, can you provide the name of the I think it was in 2023 there was a show. Could you name
the shows that I've worked on?
Yes,
Fringe?
yes, please,
yeah.
yeah.
So this last year, I worked on Now Jump, which was at the 905
Yes.
Cole. Last year.
Yeah.
Last year, I worked on We Are Nothing Without Hantu Hantu, which was also at the 905 Cole. And then 2 years before that, I produced Camino, Some Other's Journey, which was live streamed because pandemic.
And then Lorelei was Queen Out Verb.
Yes. Yeah. So this last year I did Queen Out Verb at the Broadwater.
Incredible. And so for both of you, whether it's the writing or just the creation process, when you're working with creative, when you are the creative, when does that start? You know, when does that inception begin, those conversations? What's the rough timeline look like leading up to June?
Larry?
I think every writer has their own process, so however long it takes you to come up with a script, that's totally your process and totally valid. I'm always working on like multiple scripts at one point, which is not like a brag. It's like I cannot finish anything to save my life. But yeah, as soon as you're ready to have a workshop reading, I guess, with some invited friends, I think that's the place to start. And I would probably do that at least now. If you're planning to produce in June, I would start hearing your script out loud now so that you can get a gauge of what's really working and what's really not working. And then you still have time to edit. And then I would probably have my first production meeting like in January, February with trusted folks that I want designing on my show.
Yeah, I would say inspiration-wise, I mean, when an idea hits you, We're all theater artists, so we know what that feels like. If it feels organic and it feels human to you, seize that and take the opportunity to create something about that. As a practical rule, if you can write 10 pages on top of any idea, then you have a good idea. I would say, yeah, at the top of January, you should be able to have at least an initial meeting about what you want to do and what it's going to look like. And depending on whether you are making something that is more collaborative and it requires writing along the way, or you want to have something done and then you go into your rehearsal process, I think that's important to like know how you actually want to create the idea. So you should at least have that kind of down by like the top of January.
Excellent. Yeah. Thank you so much. I also want to talk about then with writing, you know, sometimes we'll write about some really hyper theatrical world, or really like, oh, this massive moment in the show has to happen. Obviously anything can happen at Fringe, but I want to know how big can you go in these productions? How big have you gone? And what are some of those ways, and like in the trickiest of moments, or like, oh, we need to accomplish this big feat? How did you guys work with that? If you have any examples of that.
Go ahead. Yeah. Great question, Rody. Great question.
Slay.
Yeah. That's a great question. You stumped us both there.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I mean, I would say don't limit yourself, right? Like, we're artists. If you have a big idea, go for it. I do think, though, that storytelling is the most important part of any theatrical piece. And if you're dreaming of something outside of your budget, I mean, like, I don't know about y'all, but I don't have endless money to throw into a project anywhere. If you're dreaming of something that big, I would try to break it down into why do I want that? What is the impact that I'm hoping my audience takes away from this moment that I'm dreaming about? And then try to figure out other ways with my creative team to create that same impact within my budget.
Yeah, I would say writing-wise, don't limit yourself. I think that's the magic of theater specifically, is that we're able to create big ideas in these really small spaces, either materially or through writing. And I think it's just a matter of you got to put your nose to the grindstone a little bit. And if you want a huge idea, you got to make it happen. You can use your resources. I'm thinking specifically about drag and how we get certain outfits together or certain concepts together. And it's like cardboard, hot glue, beads, rhinestones, whatever you have to do to get that final thing, go for it and like work hard on it, because it will ultimately add to the vision. And you should never compromise your vision because you feel like you're limited in your space. Make it happen, because that's what's going to impress the audience, and that's why the audience is coming to see theater. Right.
Brilliant. Yeah, absolutely. I think something I want to touch on, because you're already mentioning already, is like there are other ways of executing that vision and that goal. When it comes to, because Fringe is so fast paced, like 15 minutes load in, load out, with your tech times, what's those conversations when you have like this vision? Is it all like, oh, I'm going to lean on the props to tell this, or, oh, let me talk to the lighting technician? What's it like in both your respects? Like, how have you accomplished those conversations?
I think step one is to take inventory of what's accessible to you, both designer-wise, like your designer's strengths, and your budget. I always go back to budget because I work with a nonprofit where we have a very tight budget. So just being aware of what is available to you, I think, first and foremost, and then creating the experience for your audience as well. I recently saw a show that was supposed to take place in an airplane, and before you even got in, like the front of house staff was like flight attendants, and they were giving you the rundown, they were giving you your loading ticket, they were like telling you all the rules and stuff, and then they lead you into the aircraft. So just thinking outside of the box and creating that whole rounded experience. And it could even come down to the communications that you're sending before the show, like you're welcoming your audience. You could already have a character doing that, right? Like, I don't know, maybe for your shows, like the queen who is going to be in the show is the one sending the message, or maybe it's a video, or maybe, you know, like just creating that experience for your audience, I think, is the key.
Totally. Like in terms of like the dramatic universe that you're building on top of your show, how can you expand that as much as you can for the audience, and how can you commit to storytelling across all forms, from your promotion to the sets and the props? Specifically with Queen Out, we had a lot of set pieces and a lot of prop pieces, and we had to really choreograph that. It was really, really tight, but we made it happen. And I think that's really what I want to emphasize, is if you feel in your head you're really committed to something, you can find a way to make it work, and it just takes a matter of practice, discipline, choreography, and really organization. A lot of our show, we had like 21 different wigs, we had like 16 different costumes, we had several set pieces, we had a train track that ran through the center of the stage. It was a lot, but we made it work. And so it's about talking to your team, getting the audience on board. We had a really specific plan about what to do with the audience if there was a delay, for example. So it's just about that organization. But on top of that, you can layer on your storytelling and find ways to kind of tie practicality with your dramatic universe, if you will. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah,
sorry.
Please.
A big thing I focus on when I'm producing a show is how can a set piece be used in multiple ways. So this table might just be a table, but you can also lean in to the talent that you've brought onto your project. A really good actor can sell a table as anything, right? So how do you transform this table into the 30 different things that you need it to be? Do you all know the show Love, Loss, and What I Wore, by any chance? Yeah. Well, it's a very interesting play that just kind of, it's like a bit of a memoir, but like it tells a story based on what they were wearing for specific formative moments in their life. And I saw a production of it that was literally just like this one grand wardrobe and like 7 different chairs for each scene. And the wardrobe would open, it was magical, there was light. You would see them like transform into their costume and like take a different chair, and you automatically knew where they were. So just thinking about how you can use one piece in many ways. For the first show that I did at Fringe, all of our costumes and props were in suitcases, so we could transform from scene to scene by opening a suitcase, and that was really special because, one, load-in was so easy. You got to do like your prop list before you even got to the venue because you're like, is everything in this suitcase that needs to be in this suitcase? Yes. Okay, now you just put it where it goes. And the rest of the set was just 6 chairs, and we're able to go from, East LA to a desert to coming into Los Angeles for the first time and really create that space. So yeah, use your creativity.
Yeah, a helpful read on top of that, and no, this is not required literature, but it's helpful, is Viewpoints, Anne Bogart. She is a theater practitioner, and she developed a method that specifically plays into the architecture of a space and how to use the architecture of a space to transform the scene or whatever you're doing. That might be just a helpful read as well, because when a table is flat, it's a table. When it's upright, it's a door. When, you know what I mean? It's like you play with different angles of different things, and you're able to get a lot done with a lot of relatively simple few items. So that's a helpful read too if anyone's having any troubles with having a really large idea and needing to streamline it down to just a few pieces of rehearsal furniture in a small space. I mean, that's what we had to do. And a lot of these Fringe venues are like small theaters like this, right? So you're not alone in that challenge. And like you can definitely hit up other Fringers and use your community to like ask questions. And there's a lot of people with a lot of different skill sets. You never know.
Yeah.
So piggybacking off of that, for literature, moment work is really good. It's the method that Tectonic Theater developed. They wrote the Laramie Project, and it breaks down storytelling through every part of theater. So you can take a scene or a monologue and try to tell that whole story using just a prop, using just a light, using just a costume piece. And you can do this anywhere, which is really the great part about it. If you're rehearsing in your backyard, like I did for most of the shows, at Fringe, you could use any form of light. Like it could be a flashlight, it could be string lights, and just kind of challenge yourself to tell that story without words, and then see how you can intertwine the props and the costumes to create this whole new way to tell that story.
Incredible. And I think both of you in what you guys are executing and creating, what you're saying is the creativity of it. And it's talking about like those spaces. It's even before, like Larry, you're talking about, it's like your audience is coming in. And yes, you have 15 minutes to load in. That 15 minutes also includes, though, getting your audience in the house and making those decisions on like, oh, do I want to load it in 10 minutes and then have them step into this world? Or like do a flight attendant thing, or like have that immersive immediately as they're being checked in. Because there's so many ways to accomplish that. Once you understand the boundaries or the limitations or the confines, the box, once you know the box, it's been so interesting to see you both like work within that box and see what there's able to accomplish. With all this creativity and all of these, like, how does a table become something else? What does that rehearsal process look like? And what's the timeline? I know that like Fringe is a space for so many people and so many artists who also work, in the day or in the night or different schedules. What's been that rehearsal process been like? And then what's the creative process in the rehearsal space? So I don't know who wants to take it first.
Yeah, I'll take it. I mean, obviously, the most practical thing is taking stock of what's actually available to you in your space. Sometimes you get a space first, and then you realize what they have, and you use it to what you need. Or you're looking for specific features of a theater, and you need to like narrow your search to figure out what theaters have that thing. When I was producing my show this last summer, we had projections. And it was really important for us, for example, to have a theater that obviously had a projector and a projector screen, which a lot do, so that was good. But that's just something to take into consideration is, in your idea of how you're developing your story, what are the mediums that you need to communicate that? And if projections or anything else is one of them, you got to take stock of that. And then also figuring out how to integrate that into the world. What, besides the practical function of the projector giving us like the scene, what is the role of projections in the dramatic universe? How do they tie in with the characters? How do they tie in with what's going on? Does the projector ever become its own character? Do you know what I mean? So it's like fun to kind of think about that and play with that in the rehearsal. And there's no wrong ideas. That's a fun thing about rehearsal. You can try it over and over again, and you can do it a different time every time. And it's a lot of fun. And that's theater until you land on something that works, and it works for you creatively and also practically. That's always like the really hard balance with these Fringe shows, is considering the practicality of everything while having these really big ideas. But the most important thing is staying realistic about what's available to you. And if all that's available to you is like a few chairs and a projector, then how are you going to make these chairs just as much a part of the show as these characters? And like, what can these chairs do for us to like further the story and communicate that, right?
Totally. For me, the rehearsal process and creative process, I find huge value in building that ensemble. And I know it can feel like, man, I just want to stage this show and like get as many runs in as we can. But the more that your ensemble, unless you have a solo show, then, you know, do whatever you want. But, but if you're working with an ensemble, the more that they can have each other's back on stage, like that really comes across to the audience. And especially in Fringe, where you're all kind of hopefully pulling together your resources, like all of your actors probably know somebody, all of your designers can probably pull from somewhere. Really making that time where you can have those conversations, I think is super important. And then playing, I think, is the most important part, because if you direct like me, like you want to block the whole show in a day and then just do runs after that. So really allow that time for play to happen. I really do like using moment work in my rehearsal process, especially if you're working on a brand new piece that's never been done before. And it's really helpful with that ensemble building that I was talking about, because you kind of give space for everybody to share their own artistic voice in the room. And then you as a director can step back and see like, this person's really strong with this person is really good with this, and this designer is like very talented in this style. How do I marry these voices to create a really powerful and impactful project? And then I think above all, take care of yourself, especially like April, May. You're gonna be ripping your hair out just trying to get your vision on the stage. So be realistic way beforehand, like right now, on what can be accomplished, and just be okay with that. Like really focus on the story that you're trying to tell. Make sure that the story and the impact that you're trying to convey is what's really getting across. Everything else is an embellishment, in my opinion, and can heighten a project, sure, but the actual story and message that you're trying to get out there needs to be the number one most important thing. And then if you have an amazing set that can support that, awesome. If you have great lights, wonderful. But if you don't, then the story should still be able to stand on its own.
Yeah, incredible. I think there's... this is awesome. Talking about what the limitations are, what you have, and what's in the space. Because currently we have some of the venues already enrolled in the Hollywood Fringe system. Registration will open February 1st. So right now we're talking to new venues that want to come into Hollywood Fringe, and we're taking into account like what do they have. And if you'll check in www.hollywoodfringe.org/venues, you can then select like, oh, if I absolutely need a projector, you can click that tab. Also, if you know like your audience will need ADA accessibility, there's a tab there. It also says like anywhere from 0 to 25, 25 to 50, 50 to 99, like all those seating arrangements will happen, and you're able to like reach out to those venues, start those conversations. For you both, when you do know what your venue is, let's break it down. When do you find your venue? When do you're like, oh, this is the venue I'm going to be performing in for a Fringe timeline?
Like a month from now.
Okay.
Like end of December going into January. Well, because when does registration usually open?
February 1st.
Right, exactly. So if you really want to get in on certain venues, depending on where you want to go, it's good to have an idea of what you want to do by February. If you need a little bit more time, there's a way to make it work. I took my time last year, and I still got a great venue. If you're looking for a specific performance calendar, you want to set up your performances a specific way throughout the month of June. The sooner you get on top of a venue, the better, just because they book out their calendars first come, first serve. But I jumped in probably like April, I think, onto the Broadwater, and there were still dates available, and they'll make it work if they are interested in your show, which they always are because it's Fringe. So yeah.
As soon as possible, I would say. As soon as possible within your means. I always, like, again, take care of yourself. Don't, like, front the money now if you don't have it. If you have to wait until the last minute, like, there's always going to be a venue. I like to have all my dates, like, as early as possible and assemble my team based on those dates, because you might really want, like, a certain actor or designer, But if you're constantly trying to work around everybody's schedule, it's not going to happen. Like, you're not going to have everybody in the room that you want. So to take care of myself, what I do is I create my whole rehearsal calendar and performance calendar as early as possible, so that then when I am approaching artists, I can say, here's what I have planned. And maybe you have like a short list of people that you want, right? Like 1, 2, 3. You start at 1 and it's like, how does this work for you? Okay, we can adjust here. Now you have like a team of 2 that are really spearheading this project, and then you can go down your list and create a calendar that works for everyone. But the earlier that you can get organized, I think, is just the better, because there's nothing harder than creating with a producer that like is figuring it out as they go. So just, yeah, in order to take care of yourself and your team, I would say as soon as possible within your means. That rhymed. Weird.
Nice.
Okay,
Into it.
I am so excited that we're recording this, because something else that we'll release later is like, the 10 like pieces of advice, and I'm gonna have so much fun looking through all these and like being like, oh my, it's gonna be hard now narrowing it down to 10 for this whole session, so this whole event, and I'm like, oh my god, there's so much amazing tidbits. For venues, and you've toured it, you've talked to them. Have you had to have like specific conversations, being like, hey, like I'm trying to accomplish X, Y, and Z in the space. How does that happen? Whether that's prop or set, and then some spaces have their own technician. Sometimes you bring in one. What has that experience been like for both of you?
I mean, all the theaters that participate in Fringe are really excited to be there, and so any staff person that you meet is usually very nice. And so I had a situation with my show where we needed specific tech specs, and we kind of had to compromise with them a little bit because it was just about the volume spilling over into other venues. Mm-hmm. Specifically, the show was featuring 2 drag queens, and so we had some club scenes where we needed some crazy lighting and some loud music, and louder than us was kind of what we were going for in this specific moment. And we had to work with our tech person and really have a conversation and kind of dive into the storytelling as to why we wanted this thing. And once you get them on the same page about the why behind every creative decision that you have, it's really helpful for them to compromise and collaborate with you and build something that works. So in my case, we had our stage manager reach over to the stage manager of one of the other venues. They had this whole conversation about it, and we weren't involved. They did it on their own accord. And our tech person came back and was like, hey, like I got this figured out for you, and I know you wanted it. So, you know what I mean? And I think it's just important that as you go through and you start making creative decisions about your show and what you're writing, knowing the why behind specific design choices and knowing the why behind certain character choices or whatever, it'll help you communicate with your actors, your designers, and it'll help curate an environment where people can feel like they're contributing into the ensemble and everyone's like on the same page. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. I really like to have my own lighting designer. I know that some venues do have lighting people, but the more that you can come prepared into your tech, which usually a venue will give you like an hour or 2 into your contract designated specifically to teching, and then you can always pay for more. I like to pay for a full day of tech because I think it's really important. But having a very knowledgeable lighting designer is going to save your life. If they can be the ones in contact with the venue, asking them about their rep plot, asking them about the light capabilities, what kind of board they use, they can come into tech really prepared to just talk to their in-house technician and get your lights out of the way really fast. I like to lean into lighting and sound because I think that lighting and sound can transform a space into anything, really. So that would be my advice. And again, I think the technicians that you're going to run into at every venue are going to be really nice, super chill in my experience. But you should be prepared in order for them to be nice to you.
Be nice to your technicians. They're doing a lot. They're juggling a lot. I do want to ask about going into tech, because we're talking about rehearsal. We're talking about creation. When you're into that, like the week before, the 2 weeks before June, and those venues have been talking to you about your tech time, what is a typical tech experience at Fringe? How much time do you get, and what's that like communication level, which you've already been touching on?
I think one thing I would highlight is that whoever's teching your show is probably teching like 10 other shows at least. So if you really want that individualized look or experience, you're going to want to bring in your own designers. In my experience, tech has been like a couple hours built into your contract. Most venues will work with you and their schedule if you need more time than that. I think tech is like where everything comes together. It's also a really great time for your team to bond. And I don't know, everyone kind of like, tech is a big deal, right? Like Tech Week. So yeah, that's kind of been my experience with tech. I would say if you're willing to pay for a full day of tech, then it's just like any other tech that you've been through. And I would personally highly advise going that route.
Yeah, when I did my last show, we had 4 hours of tech time included in our contract with the venue. So we took those 4 hours and we still needed more time. So we had to go and pay for more time. Not that that's necessary. We also had a 2-person show and we had a lot going on. It was a lot of tech for a Fringe show. So if you're doing a solo show, yeah. So if you're doing a solo show and it's pretty streamlined, you won't have to worry about that as much. But if you have an idea that you think is going to take a little bit more time, I would anticipate that. Usually when you go into a tech, they always say like, this is the tech's time. Like you should have your show all done. There's no more changes. Like this is the technician's time. And I would say with Fringe, that is partially true, but also like you need to be ready to adapt a little bit. And I think you need to be ready to come into the tech with what's negotiable and what's non-negotiable for you. If there's a theatrical moment it is so absolutely necessary for the storytelling of the piece, you need to come into tech prepared to tech that first. And you need to get that under your belt, because if you are on a limited time crunch and you're trying to go through, for example, like chronologically, you might miss moments that are really important to you. At the same time, you also have to come in with things that you know you're willing to give up and you're willing to negotiate with them, whether it be like a lighting look or something like that. You just need to know like what are your must-haves during your tech time and what are your would likes. And being able to differentiate between those two and be ready to adapt and be ready to kind of like mold the theater piece to the space that you're in. Because unless you're also paying for rehearsal time beforehand too, a lot of time, like your first time in the space is that tech. You can pay for rehearsal time at these venues usually, but yeah, sometimes usually it's your first time in the space when you're doing your tech. So just be ready to go in and adapt it to the space accordingly.
Yeah, incredible. And thank you for kind of hitting that on the nail that like, it may be the first time I, speaking from personal experience, before I joined the admin team, when I was an artist doing this, I was producing like an ensemble show, and I did not heed this warning. So we had like a 7-person show, and when it came to tech, I was like, oh yeah, we'll just need an hour and a half. That's fine. It'll be great. And like, it was not fine. Like, I was freaking out. Like, thankfully we had early conversations with our technician and our stage manager was keyed in, but we were lucky that nothing went wrong. And like, I can advocate so much for having that tech time, especially if you have like these really big obstacles. And that time, like you're saying, Lorelei, it'll fly by so fast that like getting the main points across, the biggest hurdles that you want to do in your show first, allows that to just, that weight off your shoulders is so much better.
Yeah.
So I cannot like emphasize as much what you guys have both said, because it's so important.
But also like I just want to emphasize that if you're on a low budget and you can't pay for the extra rehearsal time or the extra tech time, know that accordingly and just plan for that. I mean, knowing that, you know, it already takes enough to light and put in the sound cues. So if you add like projections on top of that, like you're risking a little bit more, or knowing just specifically like I need to tech these like top 5 moments in my show, and anything else we can just fill with whatever we can come up with in these 4 hours. Like if you're on a low budget, don't stress yourself out trying to be like, I need the extra time. Like, you're a theater artist. If anyone can do it, it's you. Like, trust me, it's gonna be fine, but just go in prepared. Help yourself by going in prepared.
And I think noticing too, like they said how they had 4 hours. Our contract only had 2 hours, I think. It might have been 1 hour. So that's something that you're gonna wanna really consider when you're talking to your venues, is how long is that tech time. I will say though, I think that we had 2 rehearsals that were 2 hours each in our contract as well. So yeah, really look at that contract and then prepare with your stage manager beforehand too. if you have a really good stage manager, you can really just be a producer or director or writer, whichever hat you're wearing at Tech. And I think that's really important. And creating that list of must-haves and things that you absolutely want with your stage manager, so that then they're the ones facilitating that actually happening. And you can just say, I want it more this, I want this, and not necessarily have to be the one communicating with the technicians.
A stage manager is so helpful if you can swing that. If you just even have like a friend who's willing to do you a favor, hit them up, because it's really helpful just for yourself, and it helps you go into the space more prepared. So if you're like doing a solo show, don't write it alone, bring a friend.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and getting that second pair of eyes or that third or fourth pair of eyes is so helpful in that, like, the formation of the show. And something that I wanted to talk about, which you're already hitting on, which is about, like, when you're like, oh, these are the top things, and then if we don't get to this moment in the show, it's fine. Like, we have a backup, we have a plan B. But how do you know when a technical element, you're like, okay, we have to say goodbye to this moment? Like, when do you know that a technical element is necessary in your script versus a wish list item?
I would say you really need to consider the original idea and why it came to you. And I think we come up with ideas because they feel human and they feel organic to us. I think when we think of stories, we're building reflections of ourselves or of like the world we see around us. And as you consider that and you think about how the tech plays into that, I'm being pretty nondescript, but basically just if you think about the spine of your piece and you think about what tech moments or what moments will help move up the spine of the piece to the climax, those are what you're going to want to consider. And I mean, how do you know when it's time to cut something when the practicality outweighs the need for the desire for it to be in the show? I think, you know what I mean? There's moments where you're going to realize that something just is not possible. And I think you have to be able to like kind of like kill your baby a little bit and just find a way to adapt to that or find a new way to go about it that also serves the main idea or the thematic statement or whatever. You just really want to think about what you want the audience to walk away with, whether it's a feeling or a message, and whatever cues you want to make or whatever you want to write into your show that'll help get the audience there. You're thinking about the audience experience and what they are seeing on the stage that communicates the storytelling to them. You know what I mean? And if you feel like there's a moment that it is make or break, if we don't have this cue, they will walk out of the show with a completely different idea than what I'm wanting to communicate to them. That's when you got to like really go in and be like, okay, this is really important to us. You know what I mean?
Yes.
Yeah.
Pretty much that. I like firmly believe that any script can be done with very little resources. Like my high school and college and like now nonprofit programs, like we're very limited, and I think that our storytelling is still very powerful. So I would say if you're relying on a costume to tell your whole story, like you need to work on your story. So I like in college, I had a professor who would not give us costumes until our character was fully developed, because then they would say like the costume is wearing you, you're not wearing the costume. So just make sure that your story is really strong. Also, I really doubt like you'll be in tech and it'll be the first time that you realize something might not work. So somebody's going to express concern to you along the process. Early on, one of your designers might say like, hey, that's super cool and I love where your brain's at. I have these concerns. Like, listen from day one. Don't stay on your ego and be like, no, we'll be fine, we'll make it happen. You brought these people onto your team for a reason, so really listen to their expertise the same way you would want them to listen to your expertise in your script writing or whatever, right? So really using your designers early on, I think, is key, because they probably have like other ideas on how to get that message across within their medium. So just like really put together a team that you trust, explain your vision, and ask them, first of all, like, this is a big idea. Do you think that we're going to have any issues making it happen? If they say yes, ask them, okay, like, how would you do it? And then be receptive. I think collaboration is super important.
Brilliant. Yeah, there is something about like ensemble solo, any show really isn't like down to one person. It's a massive team, and we've talked about collaborators throughout this conversation about like designers, technicians, the venue. How many, in your experience, when you were doing this, how many people are involved? How many people are from like, oh, I need a friend to read this and give me feedback on it, all the way to like, hey, this is our team on the production. How many people, when you are putting on this production, are really like putting hands onto this show?
I mean, in general, I would say the more the better, just from the standpoint that diversity is good and diversity of viewpoint is good. And if you're willing to share your work and get people's feedback on it and ask them questions like, what did you think? I'm trying to do this with this moment. Did that come through? Does this communicate? That's good. But I'll also say that with my last show, it was just 3 of us. It was me, my co-star who I wrote the show with, and our technical director. And it was just the 3 of us all the way up to the end. And we wrote it in our living room, and we were just like, whatever. We didn't know really what was going to become of it. We just wanted the experience of putting a show together and doing the Fringe, which we were really excited about. So I think if you have confidence in your idea and you're grounded in it and you know what the story is, you can get away with having a small group of people. But if you are at the point where you're looking for feedback, or you're looking for you're looking to see if your ideas are coming across, it's good to share your work. And that's what's great about the Fringe community as well, and doing events like these, is meeting people and getting different people from different areas of expertise to share your work with and get new ideas and more, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think even if you have a solo show, get a director at least. If you can get a stage manager and a director, I would say like that's the minimum of what your team should be. Because if you are doing a solo show and you wrote it, you don't want to also like be directing it and teching it. Like, you need time to be an actor. And I think like that's really important, to give yourself that space and time to get into character, to not have to worry about like, are my props, well, you should always check your props, but like to not be the one that has to preset everything and send out every piece of communication, send out rehearsal reports, whatever. Like, I think the more people you can have on your team, the better. But if you have one person who you really trust to direct your solo work and a stage manager who can get you there, I think that is the minimum. I like to have as big of a team as I can, because we're all busy. We all have different schedules, especially in LA. I think like some people are working night jobs, some people are working day jobs, some people are picking up acting gigs in between. And the more people that you can have on board, the more eyes that you have on specific aspects of your show who are just kind of focused on that aspect. And I think that can be really helpful.
Absolutely. And you may not even know, like, because you're absolutely like, oh, I want to get a director, I want to get a stage manager, and you may not know where to find those individuals, because you may have that community, you may have it great, but also Fringe, there are like Facebook groups that the Fringe moderates, or ones we don't, that the community is already around, that you're able to reach out to and ask about. And then going back to those reviews, the feedback, my apologies, the feedback, something I was doing, which if you guys were upstairs in the previous panel, I spoke about it briefly, but just because I wanted to, 2 weeks, it's been a wild 2 weeks, but I was reading the reviews that Fringers left for shows that just happened, and audience members, and they were so insightful and so helpful on like, oh, here's what I thought of your piece, I enjoyed this, I enjoyed that, things that could be worked on. Like, the feedback never stops, and Fringe is just one place for your work. It's not the end all be all. And much of the work goes on to do other things, which is very exciting. And I wanted to ask you both, when your work is going to go somewhere else, what are the intentions? Is it like, do you scale up depending on your venue? Like, how does that journey go post Fringe?
Good question. Well, I mean, I'll say for me, I mean, we did our show Queen Out Verb this last Hollywood Fringe in 2024. We'll be taking it to Sydney next year, and we're definitely thinking about upping it. And we're now in the process of taking it back into a lab space almost, and picking apart scenes and figuring out things we can improve on. Again, going back to like, what are we trying to communicate with this scene? what is missing from the show if this scene is taken out of the show? What is this scene for? And also production-wise, you know, like putting a little bit more dazzle on it. Why not? It's theater, you know what I mean? If you have the means to do it. And luckily we put down, you know, the payment that we could the first time around to get like a basic set of costumes and wigs together. Now that we have this opportunity in like a year's worth of time to up it up or like make it more, you know, we're taking that opportunity. And I think having fun with that. I think once you have the main idea, now it's theater. Now let's have fun with it. Now let's like get more costumes in here or get more props or, I mean, not if that's not helpful to your piece. If you have enough costumes and props, then leave it alone. But maybe, you know, let's find ways to communicate the character more. Let's find more fun moments that we can incorporate into this. What worked organically in the room that like surprised us the first time around that we can incorporate as part of the script the second time around. Things to think about. And like theater is so fun because it's constantly moving and it's not a movie, it's not a TV show where you can like stream it. It's constantly changing. And I think that as theater artists, we should welcome that change and we shouldn't try to like stifle ourselves into like doing it the same way every single time. It's a breath and it changes and it molds to its space. And like, how can you, if you want to change the story or you want to edit something in or you want to take something out, do it. You know what I mean? It doesn't need to be a completely new idea for you to perform it again. So, yeah.
Yeah. I think scaling is something you can think about before you have your first production, like while you're still in the writing process, thinking about what do I want the journey of this piece to be once Fringe is over. I don't think there's anything wrong with, like, if you just want to do it at Fringe and be like, I did that cool thing, call it a day. I think there's value in that too. There's nothing wrong with that at all. For the first show that I did at Fringe, my goal was really to get it into the community as much as I can. So I made sure that it could be done with 6 chairs and 6 suitcases anywhere, literally anywhere. Like we've done it in backyards, we've done it in dorms, we've done it community centers. A few other schools have done it and have been able to scale up the production based on that. Like I wrote it in such a way where you can throw projections behind any scene and then you could do that. You could add set pieces if you want. When we live streamed it, we were able to build like a set for the show, but we didn't need that set for the story to come across. And I think it really just depends on your goal for the show. Where do you want it to go after Fringe, if you want it to go anywhere? If you wanted to go into the community, for example, which I did, like I didn't write a projector being essential to the storytelling of the show because then you're limiting where that show can go, right? So if a projector is really important to your show, you just have to be okay with knowing that there's certain spaces where your show, like it will not be able to be accommodated. And I think that's fine too, just being self-aware of your piece and what you want for it.
Incredible. Yeah, I think that it's well, because Larry, because I just have a question. I have this question because you're working with so many different creatives from shows to shows. What does that initial conversation look like from a producer standpoint, and then Lorelei as well, when you're talking to someone else who has this piece that they're bringing? What are like those first entry questions that you're talking to from a producer standpoint to someone who producing is like new for them completely? It also could be like it's a longer conversation.
No, like hitting up like technicians and actors to be a part of our thing.
Like when you're so let's say you have an artist who's like, oh, I have this piece, and I want to bring it to life, but I don't have those producing skills. What are like the top 3 producing skills that you're like, oh, if you're also wanting to build up your toolbox as a producer, here are the 3 biggest helpful tips as a producer at the Fringe level?
At the Fringe level.
It's a great question.
I mean, you have to consider the hierarchy of the roles, and usually a producer is a very administrative role, usually. When you come into Fringe, you have a little bit more of a creative input, but if someone came to me and they brought me an idea and they just weren't sure where to go from there, the first 3 questions I would ask are, what is your budget? What does the show look like? Is it, in descriptors, is it big? Is it small? Does it have a lot of set pieces? Does it not have a lot of set pieces? Does it have a lot of costume changes? Just figuring out those details. And why now? well, why produce this specific show now? And what do you think is going to draw an audience to this? You know what I mean? I think people want to see theater that reflects themselves in the time that we're in, and not all the time. I mean, obviously there's period pieces and stuff like that, but even then, producing those in contemporary times has its own stamp. So why now? And considering that as part of like the project goal and making sure that we're all on the same page in terms of why we are producing this show right now and what we want to take away for the experience of it, because it just may be, I want to do Fringe. I've never done Fringe before, and I just want to I don't care if no one comes to my show. I just want the opportunity to like do a tech and do some shows. Great, then we can like plan for that. But if you, for example, are wanting to take your show into the community, or you want to take your show traveling, you know, you should have kind of that idea and what you want to do with it, right?
Yeah. I would say the number one skill for me is people skills. Can you be kind to your team? Can you be just a good person that people want to work with? If you're a producer who's unkind, it's going to be your last time working with those people, I promise. Especially at the Fringe level, where we're not like pouring tons and tons of money. Like, if you're not paying me and you're not nice to me, I'm gonna quit. Like, period, because you're not going to be mean to me. You're just not. I would say the second thing is managing a budget. And I think being realistic about how much you can fundraise is part of that. Fundraising in LA for theater is really challenging. You don't want to do that on your own, but that is part of your job as a producer, is to get the money required for your project to happen. So being able to be out there and fundraising is a super important skill. And then being able to break up that goal into different areas of your show financially is really important. So if your fundraising goal is like $3,000, like, where is that money going? I think that's really important to know before you even start fundraising, because people are way more likely to donate if you can tell them exactly what they're donating to. So if 2,000 of this is going straight to the talent for this 2-person show, they're each getting $1,000 each, yay. Then people who want to support talent are gonna be the ones donating to that. If 2,000 is going to your design, then people who want to go see theater because they really like good design, they're gonna want to donate to your show. So knowing that is really important. And then I think the third was people skills, budget. I would say time management is really important. Some laughs, I don't want to know. Time management is super important, especially as a producer, because people are going to be asking you for timelines for everything. So if you don't know how to make a production schedule, that's something that you should prioritize. And if you don't know what goes into making a production schedule, hit me up. I have a template. But you want to know, like, when is first draft of costumes due? Like, when are renderings due? When is this? The more you can break down everything for people, the easier it is to keep them and yourself accountable into meeting those goals. And having early deadlines for those things is super valuable, because you're gonna find out early in your process if, like, your relationship with someone isn't working, and you can break it off respectfully and with good intentions early on, and find someone for your project who is gonna work. And then, yeah, time management, super important. I don't know if y'all have ever worked with a director who's like, tomorrow's opening and the show's not done. You don't want to be that person. So I think managing your time is taking care of yourself and taking care of your team.
I think the also, like, the taking care of yourself is, because we say that Fringe is it's a marathon, it's not a sprint, because we're starting now. You're all starting now, basically, or you've started, a couple months or weeks from before then. There's so much to cover, and it's very easy to just, like, personally burn out. Creatively is one thing, but, like, just being like, oh, I'm just exhausted. Like, my body is exhausted, and I cannot advocate for this enough. But, like, yes, there are so many opportunities that we have, and there's so many workshops and office hours, networking, but also, like, when you need a break, like, give yourself that time. Like, it's so hard being kind to yourself sometimes, and, like, being like, no, I don't need to go to this office hours. I don't need to go to the X, Y, and Z. I just need to stay home. I need to rest. I need to take care, because you'll most likely be wearing so many different hats that it's okay to just take a break to step back for a second. But also touching on going on like budgeting and all of these producer goals that we need to look at. We just released about like a week ago, I think, maybe 2 weeks ago, I don't remember anymore. But we released the 2024, right? That was the 2024 annual report. I think you can find it on hollywoodfringe.org/annual. And what that does is it synthesizes what a lot of the stats were for the participants who just did Fringe. Like I think the overwhelming majority did 5 shows. I think 45% came in with previously funded work. They weren't just like putting it from the get-go. Like they had either created a GoFundMe, they created some other fundraiser, and that assisted them on their journey with budgeting. And definitely take a look at that, because there's so many interesting stats of what just the last year's participants did, and what that breakdown looks like. It was super helpful. I'm really excited because I got to format it all, but take a look. It's great. I actually want to kind of pass it over to the audience and ask you guys if you have any questions. We'll kind of just do like raise hand format, and I'll walk over to you with the mic just so that we're catching everything. And then I'll trickle in some questions as everyone's kind of doing it all. But I want to hear what your burning thoughts are. Anyone got any questions? Did you know that this was going to be interactive? Should I have given you a heads up, maybe? Okay. I also didn't give you guys a heads up on that.
Yeah, I'm not doing that.
My apologies.
I gotta get out.
It's softball. Hello, my name is Mary. This is Wes. We're writing a musical.
Yay.
Which we've already been told is ambitious, but it's Fringe. So when thinking about the space, and I produced a show last year, so I know the load in and load out's crazy. And I love the advice of sound and lights, because obviously that's easy. And we put props in a suitcase too. So I love that too. In terms of set and scenic design and things, I know I went to shows this year that, you'd hang a sign or something like that. But you were saying yours is quite involved. So do you recommend trying to avoid as much as possible any kind of set design and really focusing on, I'm just trying to think as we're writing the kind of worlds we're writing in it, how much to lean on that, or is it really like utilize sound and lights and only do the minimal amount of scenic design if you even need it at all? Because that feels like the hardest thing given you're loaded in, load out, multiple places in the space, etc.
I mean, I would say at the writing point, don't limit yourself.
Right. Okay.
Send yourself to the moon. Write the ideal production. If your ideal production has a 3-story set, write that, because, because it realistically, a theater piece exists in multiple ways. It exists on stage, it exists on paper, and it exists in memory. So write the piece for paper. And then when you have the opportunity, look, there's so many shows that people do at Fringe that have been on Broadway and have been in these bigger theaters with huge sets, and then they bring them here to these little black boxes, and they still find a way to do it. So take that same inspiration, I think, and just send yourself to the moon with that one. And then as you move into tech and you start to think about a little bit more practically in rehearsals, that's when you can start to think about, how do we want to communicate this? If your story has a castle in it, how do you communicate the castle? It can be through projection, or maybe it can be through light set pieces, things that you can, pieces of fabric. You can put up fabric against a wall and suddenly that's a curtain, or that's whatever. Do you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So I think that just early on, inspiration wise, don't limit yourself. That's the fun of making theater. And then when you start to get into your rehearsal process, really early on, you'll start to realize, and obviously as you're writing, you will have the mental block of that's probably not going to happen, but write it anyway because it's organic to you and it's coming out as truth. So do that, and then you'll find a way to make it work if it's really doable within the space, I think. You know what I mean? You can do a lot with also just an ensemble of actors, and they don't all have to be one role. They could play multiple things. They could play parts. They could play inanimate objects. Get creative with your team and what's available to you, I think.
I think also, like we were talking about, knowing your intended journey for the piece, it's really important to put, if you want this to go to Broadway, write the show that's going to go to Broadway, because you don't know who's going to be in the audience, who's going to be can I see that script? I'm a producer, or I would like to maybe bring the show to my school or something. Then you can show them what your full vision was, and they've already seen your show, so they know like how you executed it. But then they can see like, oh, this is supposed to be like this huge, massive castle thing. Like they got it across, but I have the budget and time to build that. So knowing the journey that you want for your show, I think is really important in that aspect. And then also something that I learned last year was just transporting your set.
Yeah.
Make sure you know, like, we had a pickup truck and it worked out, which is great. But knowing, like, how heavy is this? Getting it off the truck, onto the ground, up a ramp, up some, like, know your venue and how long that's realistically going to take you. And, you know, the bigger your set, the more transportation space you need. Like, are you going to get a U-Haul for every show? So, yeah.
Also, if you could do me a favor, when you have the mic, sorry, thanks, Ike. When you have the mic, introduce yourself, give your preferred pronouns, and also like tell us about the show you're working on, and like there's no time like the present to start working on that tagline. So yeah, here you go, Ike.
My name is Hike. Pronouns are he, him, and my show is called Best Dad Never. About struggling to raise a self-possessed biracial daughter, but coming into my stuff as a gay Armenian American. It'll be at the Hudson Theater. And my question is, can you recommend a resource, maybe a free sound cues, like a traffic scene or party scene, nature scene, something like that? Does that exist?
Literally, YouTube. And you type it in, you type in whatever you want. And you take that to like a YouTube to MP3 converter, and you send that shit through. Sorry, am I allowed to swear? You send that stuff through a converter, and you have your sound cue. Usually, you can find a lot on YouTube. I've found like a lot of random sound cues, and it's just the thought of like, I want a sound of like a cat like in Heat, and I will literally look that up on YouTube, and it's there, I'm like, okay, so like there are people out there who make money off of making these like copyright-free sound cues. So really that's a really great resource. I mean, and I don't know anything beyond that, but do you?
I think there's a website literally called freesound.com. I want to say there is.
But also like, you know, and this is when, if you're not partial to sound design and you want to outsource this work, or you can just do it yourself, building sound cues in Audacity, Audacity, like Audacity, is actually pretty easy, and you can layer in tracks. If you're trying to build a traffic scene, for example, I heard you say, and you're trying to get a lot of different levels in there. You want the sound of pedestrians, you want the sound of cars, you want the sound of, I don't know, the cafe in the back or whatever. Look up different sound cues and layer those on top of each other. Look for like busy street sound cue, busy cafe sound cue, traffic on this day sound cue or whatever. You know what I mean? And or if you are watching something and you hear something that you really like, you can probably go on YouTube, you can find that episode or that video or whatever, you can put that through a converter again, and you can just cut that little section, that little sound. I mean, the internet is really amazing. I mean, the stuff you can do on the internet is amazing. But yeah, definitely just like, I would take inspiration from what's around you, what like any visual media that you have or any audible media that you're listening to. If you like what you hear, you can probably find it and like export it. And then just using some of these program tools, free sound files, Audacity or YouTube, and like that, and build it. And also, like, it does not need to be perfect for Fringe. It just needs to communicate what you want to communicate. So don't worry about making the perfect sound effect. That's for when you take it to, you know, Broadway. So if in the meantime, you like, part of the fun of doing Fringe is like making stuff with your own hands, and like, don't be afraid to get like gritty with it, and, you know, finding a way to make it work.
Absolutely. Oh, brilliant. Yeah.
Hi, I'm Scout, she, her, and the show I'm writing is called The Bright Heaven of Invention. It's about a group of artists who create a church to evade taxes and then accidentally start a religion. But I am new to Fringe, first time writer, and so building a team is going to be a new process for me. Do you have any advice for meeting those members of your tech team and maybe early conversations to have with them to see if they'd be a good fit, and just like kind of navigating those early talks?
I think the best thing that you can do is see a lot of theater, and don't be afraid to like talk to the people in the booth after and say like, that was really great. Like, how long have you been working in this venue? Or like, just like making genuine connections, I think is gonna get you the people that you really want working on your project. And I mean, there's like Facebook groups. There's like Technical Theater Artists of LA, which is a really good one. Theater Artists of Color is more national, but if you're looking for anything in that realm, and the Fringe Facebook groups and social hours are really good. I'm so bad at networking myself, so
Yeah.
I'm not gonna lie to you. Like, networking is really hard for me. And the best way that I've built my theater community is just like genuinely attending shows that I think I would enjoy and pushing myself to say hi afterwards.
Yeah, networking can be tough. And I'm kind of like hyping myself up as well because networking is tough for me as I share this information. But we're all here because we want to like get stuff done and we want to like make theater work. And so it's important to like put yourself out there and also know who you are and know how you work. If you're a very type A personality in the room and or if you're very casual, I mean, as you meet people, like take stock of their energy and what they give to you. If they seem really on top of it and they seem like really like up kind of vibes, then and obviously that's a scientific term, then they might be a good fit for you. Or if you're like trying to feel that out, if you're someone who's more casual, you're focusing on just finding something that's organic. If you're talking to someone to be like, hey, like let's grab coffee sometime and like chat, like it might be so fun to like work on something together. There's no guarantee that you're going to work with that person, but if all else fails, you had a great coffee with someone who is like-minded and is also doing theater, and that's helpful. And it's so fun. We're all in the room together. Yay! That we're here, and you can talk to these other artists around you and pay attention to the work that other people are making. If you find someone who you feel is making work that resonates with you, go up to them and tell them why. You know what I mean? It was fun, like doing a show that had drag in it and was obviously like very queer, and having other like queer members of the Fringe community come to the show and talking about our experience producing at Fringe and like how we can all help each other and outsource work together for next year. That's part of the fun of it. So don't be afraid to like make those connections and just know who you are and know the type of person who you are, because not everyone needs to be that super outgoing, super on top of it producer, director. Not everyone's like that. You know what I mean? So it's like if you're focused on building the relationship organically, whatever that feels like to you, and and know what you need. If you want to communicate like exactly what you need, that's helpful. And that's good to know when you're like meeting new people.
I think there's a balance too. Like early on when you're meeting someone, you don't want to be transactional, of course.
Yeah.
Because this Fringe is just 1 year, right? But hopefully you're building a theater family that's going to last you many years, who this time they're helping you out, next time you're helping them out. This time it's your story, next time it's their story. So just be genuine and also be upfront with what you have to offer. If this is unpaid, tell them this is unpaid. If there's a small stipend, tell them like it's a small stipend. If we're fundraising as a team and then splitting everything that's left over afterwards, like just be upfront about what that's going to look like. There's plenty of people who are happy to do it just for the sake of art. So if that's where you're at, being transparent is very important.
Oh, brilliant. While I make my way over there, just 2 steps back, can you, because we've been talking about set and we've been talking about environment, Lorelei, can you talk about what the Queen Out Verb set was? And then Larry, if you could talk about some of the productions. Hantu comes to mind. Of just like, just in different ways. Sometimes simplicity accomplishes so much and that it's like, it's ingenious. So if you could answer that, well, I make my way over there.
Yeah. Do you want to go ahead?
I think mine's probably simpler, so I'll go first.
Yeah.
For Hantu, it was a horror-themed play, horror memory themed play. So we really focused on the lighting and props. The set was literally 3 acting cubes that were painted in a specific style to fit the show. And then behind each cube was just like props to transform the space. But what we really focused on was creating a lighting design and a soundscape that brought together that horror element, so it was kind of more like dreamlike and memory, and you're kind of going from this character's like different memories. So it was more of a general like green wash, sometimes general blue wash, and we painted the blocks in a way that when the different light would hit them, they would look different as well.
Yeah, so we had a lot. Basically, we had a lot of rehearsal furniture that was provided to us from the Broadwater, and this is the other thing just to keep in mind. If you're writing something that has like actual set pieces, look into space, and as you're figuring out what spaces you want to do, ask them what they have, because it was really helpful to have a venue that had like a lot of rehearsal furniture for us to use. And sometimes some venues just only have like little rehearsal cues, but if you can work with that, then that's great. We had a couch, a table, a coat rack, a costume rack with costumes. We had some stools, and that was supposed to all kind of come together to be a backstage area, a dressing room for like a drag theater is kind of what the setting was. But it was also a non-chronological show. We kind of, it was a little bit abstract. So we also built this train track that ran through the center of the stage, and that was related to the context of the show. I won't get into it now. But it was, so we combined those elements for the sake of telling the story. We knew that the play was not chronological. We knew that the play almost had more of like a vaudeville variety show form than a straight chronological through play. So we took that into account in designing our set, and even though we had a lot of little set pieces to build a real space, we took the opportunity to bring in little things to make the space more abstract. And that's as simple as like throwing fabric over the couch. We layered it with all these pillows and blankets so that it looked like its own thing, and it wasn't just a rehearsal couch. And we had wigs like strewn across the stage, and we had costumes, and so we really were able to make it feel like a different space. And so that's why I'm saying too, like if you have a conviction about the space looking a certain way, you can get it done with relatively simple items, and you just have to accept that with Fringe. It's going to be a little bit looser, it's going to be a little bit more bare bones, but I think that we all know how to like get the job done in terms of communicating the idea, and you just got to go for it and like make it your own and find a way to incorporate that into your load-in and everything.
Hey everyone, my name is Max, he, him. I'm a film composer by trade, but I love the theater, and this is kind of a new world for me. I'm currently working on adapting a climate fiction, climate justice novel as a musical theater piece, and I'd love to use Fringe as a proof of concept in addition to kind of learn the community and see what's around. My question would be, have you had any experience, especially within Fringe, about live music and sound design, mixing and sound mixing? Any advice you'd give if you're trying to bring high quality music to a production of this size and scope, and maybe examples of good versions and bad versions of that in your experience?
Yeah. Larry?
Do you mean like live instruments?
Yeah.
Yeah, knowing your venue I think is super important. I know like Broadwater, the sound really travels from like venue to venue. So I produced a show there where they were doing like some heavy drumming at the venue next door, and like during our whole show there was like drumming coming through the walls, which was really unfortunate. So just knowing your venue. Also, yeah, I think that's really what it comes down to, because it sounds like you have like the practical skills to make like sound happen. It's just like finding a venue that can truly support that. And every venue is going to have a different sound setup. Like at 905, it was literally like their entire sound capability was an aux cord and like 2 speakers. So that's not going to work for you. So I think you know what you're looking for in a venue, and just finding the venue is going to be like the most important thing for you. And I think like a proof of concept is great. Like you don't have to go full out. I've attended several Fringe shows that were like music stands, and they were some of my favorite shows, because you're just kind of like, it's like a sneak peek into like what this could be, right? So yeah.
Yeah. everything Larry said, and I would also say check out the 3 clubs. That's a good venue for live music. Generally, they have a lot of capacity there. I'm sure there are other venues too. That's just the one off of the top of my head right now. I know for the Broadwater specifically, there was a whole... I didn't do a live music piece in my last one, so I'm working off of memory here, but I know that they had some issues with people bringing in live music in the sense that they had to bring their own speaker setup. It was kind of a vibe where they needed to be prepared to kind of support their own live music. So yeah, just communicating clearly with your venues about what's expected, sending emails to these venues before booking them and just asking them and letting them know like what you're planning for is really helpful. But I know the 3 clubs, I've seen a lot of music stuff there and they have a great setup. Yeah.
And you can always add a venue to Fringe. So there's like really cool bars around and like other like restaurants maybe that might fit the vibe of what you're going for, who might like want a night of entertainment in their space.
Sick. Thanks.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's also where touring the venues comes into play, where you're, when you're on the website, you're looking at it and you're like, Hudson, for example, with their 3 spaces, they have, each space has different, like we've been saying, capabilities of what they're able to accomplish, and then knowing like if you want a sound mixer early on to like handle all those channels. Yeah. Yes, brilliant. We'll do here in the front, then we'll do the second row. Here you go.
Hi, my name is Bernice Ye, pronoun she, her. I only started working on my solo show, so it's really early. Like coming today, I have not decided to do the Fringe, right? So the first session we did a solo show, I said, hell yeah, I'm going to do it. And then listen to this one, I said, oh no, I'm too late. And then also I don't have a live, I probably don't have a live, all the way to June. So I'm just wondering, for something like it's so early, like how do you decide that this year is the year? Or like, okay, maybe not now, but definitely later or like next year. What is the thinking behind those decisions?
Good question.
Well, I can tell you, I'm not producing something I'm writing this year because I know in my heart that I'm not going to be able to finish writing the script in time to produce it. But I also know that 2026 does exist. And if I need a longer timeline, then that is okay. So I think knowing yourself as a writer and knowing yourself as a producer is very important. Checking in with yourself on like what can you realistically take on in the next 8 months. Can you make it happen? If yes, if maybe, I think if it's a strong maybe, go for it. If you're like doubting yourself a little bit, I still say go for it because I think like fear of failure is gonna make like someday become never, and that's not worth it. Like if you're gonna look back and regret not pushing yourself to do it, like don't do that to yourself. But also make sure above all that like you're taking care of yourself. So I would say like go through your notes that you've taken today, like figure out like which ones are really resonating with you as challenges. Like if it's going to be challenging for you to like put together a team, or if it's going to be challenging for you to put together the money you need, then list those off and like really like check in with yourself on, can I accomplish these things in time?
Yeah, I mean, incredible. Lorelei, if you want to...
Yeah, no, I mean, I would say the same. I think it's a two-sided question. I think there's the side of it that's like practically, how do you decide to do this? And then also just personally, from a standpoint of inspiration, how do you decide to do this? I think practically, definitely what you said, definitely list what are some hurdles for you, what might be some challenges for you, and make a plan accordingly if you think you'd be able to accomplish that within a year. I think you can. I think that like the great thing about Fringe is nothing needs to be perfect. In fact, a majority of the shows are imperfect shows. That's what's fun about it. You know what I mean? And the fact that we have over 300 productions or something
absolutely.
like that.
Yeah.
So there's a million people who are in the position, less than 300. But there are people out there in the community who feel the same way as you and are taking a risk. And I would say this is the place to do it. And you're going to know that you're going to run into challenges and you're going to run into hurdles. And sometimes it's mind over matter, and figuring out if you really want it and you want to go for it, then you can do it. And hurdles in terms of like getting people on your team, meeting deadlines. if you feel like that is actually going to get in your way, you don't want to put yourself in a position where you've paid all this money for a venue or whatever like that, and you can't go through with it for whatever reason. So you should at least have that on track of like, can I put the money down for this, and can I get myself up on stage for X amount of performances? If you can get those two things and you have the desire to do Fringe, do it for sure.
I'll also add, like, there's nothing saying that your first performance of your piece can't be behind a music stand. That can't be in a small venue with 20 seats. I think like you can break down your goal into steps within Fringe even. So if like in 2025, like you think it's going to be really hard for me to find a director, it's going to be really hard for me to do these things, then use 2025 to do that. And maybe you're, like I said, you're doing a music stand and very few seats, but you're inviting people who you think they would be a good director for my piece, or they would be good on my team for 2026. You can do a full production down the line also.
Yeah, girl. I'll also add that I've actually been very excited to, like, because I'm meeting so many more artists. There are artists that they'll come into Fringe, want to experience the community. They have a show. They're maybe like, oh, maybe this isn't my year just yet, but they will engross themselves in the community. They'll meet their fellow artists. The Hollywood Fringe is there's a pretty high percentage of hyper local artists that come to Hollywood and that continue working, during non-Fringe times, and then. That's how you're also growing your friendships, the community. Thanks.
Had to.
And then, Hike, if I can use you as an example, that's all right. But Hike, you were a volunteer. You were a participant last year who has a show, and now this year is bringing the show. And like you were just immersed in the Fringe zeitgeist and was just with everyone and collecting that information about what is it like. And that's completely fine too. Like, it's your own timeline that you're committing to. Of course, when hard deadlines come in, it's different. But I just wanted to add that in, where it's like you're totally able to, if you're not a participating artist in the sense that you're not producing, please come along for the journey and collect that information, because something that we want to do, as well as like having artists bring their shows, is programs like this. We're trying to like give you guys the tools, give everyone the tools to independently produce their work, because it's hard and there's no like paint by numbers rules. So as long as we're able to like have these conversations, the better. But you had a question, and I've been talking. So here, you had a question. Sorry, my apologies.
Hi, my name is Marina, pronounced she, her, and my show is called The First People. It's about a love triangle between Adam, Eve, and Satan. And I know that you guys mentioned some books. Oh, it's a comedy, by the way.
Thank you.
Yeah. I know you guys mentioned some books. So I am originally a film director. I'm coming from film. I really want to try theater this year. And are there any resources on how to direct for theater, specifically for stage, directing actors and blocking and like all that goes with it?
I think there's a book. I'm actually not going to speak off of thinking. Let me say, I know you could. I mentioned it earlier. It's very helpful, but any literature from Anne Bogart is very helpful. And then specifically, if you're looking for your own research, if you know you're doing a 3-person play, for example, or if there are any theater artists that inspire you or your vision, I would research those people specifically, and I would look to see if there was anything other that they wrote. What I was going to say, though, is I think that there's actually a book out there that's called, like, The Director's Guide to Stage, that is like a very basic kind of like comprehensive guide as to like how to navigate directing for the stage. Little guides like that, or if you're starting from like zero, little guides like that are super helpful. But I would say like if you already have experience with directing in film, take whatever you have about like, because I know it's different because you're like working with a frame and stuff, but obviously you're considering how to use the frame to your advantage in telling the story. So I would say like use those techniques. I think that, using stage pictures, for example, and knowing like what those communicate about the characters and the story as they move along, you can adapt that into your experience. Don't be afraid if you have like limited theater experience, because theater is one of those things where you can have a creative discipline in any other arena and bring it into theater, and it would serve some purpose somewhere. So like know your strengths, and if you're knowing that at certain points you might have some weaknesses, you can also outsource that help. You know what I mean? If you might meet someone who's a director and you're like, they don't need to come onto your project, but maybe they can come join you for a rehearsal, and like you can get some feedback from them, or you can work with them during that rehearsal and just have them as a guest artist, for example. But yeah, this community is available. Lots of literature is available. But I would say know your inspirations, know your role models or whoever you're trying to emulate, and research those people.
Mm-hmm. I always lean back into moment work because I can trust my actors to do a lot. I think actors are like the most underused part of any production team. But with moment work, you're really asking the actors to create different moments, and then you as a director kind of jotting down what spoke to you about what they've created. Additionally, I would say, and again, this one is hard for me as well, but when you see a production or a company that you really admire, you can always like send an email and ask for an informational interview. And that's true for like any position in theater. I think that people should really, really take advantage of the fact that theater artists want to talk to you and like and about themselves sometimes, and also to just like nurture other people's ambitions, right? So if you see a show that you really like reach out to that director and say like, do you have 30 minutes for a Zoom call? Like, I want to pick your brain about why you made these certain decisions. And I think, yeah, like introductory literature to like why you might stage a diagonal versus a parallel and things like that is super important. But you will also know, especially since you have a background in directing, if the story is being told.
Yeah, that was incredible. I was just checking if there's any questions, but I was also going to throw in that, because we've been speaking about Anne Bogart, and just as a general, like, I kind of fell into it as like a self-help book, and I was like, oh, this is great directing, because she's a director. And I think both of you can chime in if I'm getting the name wrong, but it's a director prepares.
Oh,
like
yeah. That's a good one too.
I think it breaks it down into like 7 main like chapters. It's a quick read, and it's just super helpful to see, well, one, get an insight into her process, but also like there are some great moments on like what it is like when in a rehearsal room you're working with your actors. I mean, there's so many different schools of thought. I just think that one's a good read, and it's not gonna be like a 300-pager. It's like, okay, this feels digestible, just from like an independent like thing. Anyway.
I have one more recommendation too. One more book. Like, and this one's a really light read. It's just like 2 pages or something like that. It's called Journey to a Small Planet. And what it does is it kind of helps you define the dramatic universe of your play, and it asks you a series of questions. And what you're doing is you're building a small planet. You're building a small planet that is like the universe of your show. So it's really, really helpful if you're like just looking to figure out what you want this space to look like and like how you want it to feel. That is a great place to start, because you can get a lot of those answered and then put it into your script or just stage around it otherwise. But it's really great.
Yeah, incredible.
Journey to a Small Planet. A Journey to a Small Planet, yeah. And I forgot the author, but just write like Journey to a Small Planet, theater, or directing, it'll come up. Yeah. Sorry.
Great. And thank you for providing those resources, because it's hard sometimes to find the resources or find what you're looking for, and like when we're in community, just exchanging that information is so helpful. Okay, so we've kind of reached our conclusion here. I think we're maybe a couple minutes out to 1:30. So I want to thank you, Larry and Lorelei. Like, thank you so much. Please give them a round of applause for being incredible. Yeah, and thank you for being game for this.
That's not what I heard.
Oh,
I think you're welcome.
Thank you for being, I guess. It comes very easily to me.
Right.
So. Yeah, that's great. Well, we're going to conclude to a lunch, so I'm going to have a moment to refresh, decompress, but have a great time. We're going to pick up at 2 o'clock. We're going to do the networking session. That's going to be in the main space. And then, please enjoy your lunch. There's a great corner bakery that I think has really good coffee. But yeah, thank you all so much.
Thank you.